This is a day of affirmation, a celebration of liberty. We stand here in the name of freedom. We are committed to peaceful and nonviolent change. We must recognize the full human equality of all of our people, not just to those of a particular religion, not just to those of a particular race, not just to the wealthy, but to all of the people. We must do it for the single and fundamental reason that it is the right thing to do.
A new twist this morning for the country's most famous political dynasty.
RFK Jr. plans
Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
independence on October 9th in the state of
That it's time to heal a divided nation and return the power to the people.
Robert Kennedy Jr.
We are told today that our nation is hopelessly divided. But I found something different as I travel this country. I have witnessed an upwelling of optimism that I've never seen before. Something is stirring in us that says it doesn't have to be this way. And so I've come here today to declare our independence from the tyranny of corruption, which robs us of affordable lives, our belief in the future, and our respect for each other. But to do that, I must first declare my own independence. Independence from the Democratic Party and from all other political parties. I haven't made this decision lightly. It's very painful for me to let go of the party of my uncles, my father, my grandfather, and both of my great-grandfathers, but my sacrifice is nothing compared to the risk our founding fathers took when they signed the Declaration of Independence 247 years ago. They knew that if their revolution failed, every last one of them would be hanged. They chose to place everything on the line. When John Adams put his pen down after adding his signature to the Declaration, he turned to those present and he said to them, "Sink or swim, live or die, survive or perish. From this day on, I am with my country." I'm going to make that same pledge to you today so that I can stand before you, as every leader should stand before you, free of partisan allegiance, free from the backroom deals, a servant only to my conscience, to my Creator, and to you. Every president enters office promising to unite the nation and to work with people from the other party across the aisle. None of them ever does it. They can't. They're already chosen a side. Well, I'm not going to have that problem. I'm going to build coalitions from both sides of the aisle. And except for the small minority of public officials who are actually corrupt, I'm going to tell you this secret. They too want liberation from the system that has captured them. And isn't that ultimately what we all want? Liberation from a system that robs us of our wealth, our health, our hope, our patriotism, our ideals, our freedoms, and ultimately our sense of ourselves as a good and capable people. Is healing our divided nation possible? Let's go take back our country. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
I declare my independence.
I declare my independence.
I declare my independence.
We declare our independence.
I declare my independence.
We declare our independence.
I declare my independence.
We declare our independence.
I declare my independence.
I declare my independence.
Yo declaro mi independencia.
We declare our independence.
I declare my independence.
few men are willing to brave the disapproval of their fellows, the censure of their colleagues, the wrath of their society. Moral courage is a rarer commodity than bravery in battle or great intelligence. It is the one essential, vital quality for those who seek to change the world.
I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and I approve this message.
GM. Come on, we got like a packed house. That's the best you could do? GM. Much better. So I'm John Paller. I'm the founder of Eat Denver. I got a lot of shit online for setting this up, but so it's no secret that I'm a fan if you follow my Twitter, but tonight isn't about Eat Denver or SporkDAO endorsing Mr. Kennedy. This is about the big tent, the blank canvas, and the opportunity to share ideas. And when you walk out of here, you're entitled to whatever opinion you want. I think you're going to hear a lot of things that you're going to like. I've spent a lot of time understanding the crypto policy of the Kennedy campaign, and doubt it, but you're entitled to believe whatever you want. Better than Biden. That's, did I just say that out loud? Yes, I did. We're coming for you, Warren. Anyways, so my little speech on this is, people here at Eat Denver, most of you are not going to describe yourselves as very political, if not political at all. But you actually are. The things we're building, the tools that we're building are incredibly political. What you're saying is, I don't like the brand of politics that we're being served. The divisiveness, the bullshit, the lies, the sleight of hand, regulatory capture, onerous, regulations on this, that, and the other. It's not working. And so we're here. Why? Because we biddle the decentralized future, which is supposedly the hope for this problem. So I'm going to welcome my friend Caitlin Long to the stage. So if y'all don't know Caitlin, she's the only person to sue the Fed. Progress. We'll get there. In any case, you're about to have an amazing evening. There's literally no holds barred in questions. When we were discussing this, we want as much controversy and as much truth as we can possibly muster. So with that, I'm going to hand the microphone to you, Caitlin, to introduce Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, John. Welcome, everybody. Let's rev up the crowd for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Come on out, sir. Let's have a chat. All right. Welcome, sir. Thank you. You've got quite a crowd here. All right, folks. Run of show is about 30 to 40 minutes of questions of us chatting, and then we'll open it up to the audience. John Paller is setting up a microphone. So if you have questions, you'll line up and let's get started. I'd like to talk about freedom to innovate, corporate capture, and privacy. On your Twitter account last week, you tweeted a question. Are we moving towards a society where you have to get permission from the government to innovate? And you said, under your watch, that would not happen. How, as president, would you make sure that you don't need permission to innovate?
To innovate. Well, first of all, I'm very, very happy to be here with all of you crypto fans. And, I saw, for those of you who don't know, haven't heard my story, I knew about Bitcoin and about the different cryptocurrencies, mainly from my kids who had bought some early on. But I did not pay attention. I was on the sidelines. And during the COVID epidemic, I saw what happened to the truckers in Ottawa. And in Ottawa, we had been following my organization. Can you hear me? Yeah. My organization, Children's Health Defense, had been following the truckers and had been supporting them, and we had a reporter who was embedded with them. Is somebody?
Hey, folks, let's give him the courtesy of an audience. Nobody's paying to be in this event. Let's give him the courtesy of an audience. Thank you.
Anyway, the truckers the truckers had come from all across Canada and assembled in Ottawa to exercise rights that we all take for granted: the right to assemble, the right to petition their government, and the right to protest. And the government of Canada responded by labeling them as radicals, as right-wingers, as racists, which was not true. If you saw the videos of the trucker strike, it was like Woodstock. There were people there they were sharing water, they were playing music, they were picking up garbage, they were acting kindly towards each other. But the government used that as an excuse to use facial recognition system and other surveillance technologies to determine through the license plates, to determine and other methods to determine the identities of the truckers, and then to shut down their bank accounts. And they couldn't pay their mortgages, they couldn't purchase diesel for their trucks, they couldn't feed their children. One trucker told me that he couldn't pay his alimony and he was facing a prison term. And it occurred to me at that point that if a government has a right to shut down your bank account, that they have the capacity to enslave us, to commit any kind of atrocity. And that it occurred to me,
oh, come on. Boo! Okay, you made your point. Let's get back to listening to the presidential candidate, please. Hey, this is a peaceful crowd. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. All right, let's hear about the truckers. This is quite a story.
Anyway, it occurred to me at that point that transactional freedom was as important to a free society as the guarantees of freedom of expression. As the First Amendment means nothing if you have the right to free speech, but the government has the right to shut down your bank account and to starve you to death if it doesn't agree with your speech. And that's when I started getting interested in cryptocurrencies and alternative currencies. And during the Great Depression, my grandfather was the first commissioner of the SEC. And at that time, there were over 3,000 local currencies in this country. And some of them outperformed the dollar. And all of the the more I learned about cryptocurrency, the more important it occurred to me that this is the off-ramp for our addiction to the Fed, to the printing of money. And to the off-ramp from the monopolistic banking system, the globalist banking system that is using money printing to fund the wars and to shift wealth upward to this new oligarchy of billionaires while impoverishing the rest of us. And that crypto takes the control away from the government and away from these monopolistic institutions and guarantees all kinds of freedom. And among the freedoms that we're concerned about is the freedom to keep the fruits of your labor, which inflation robs you of. And this is, cryptos are the best hedge against inflation. And by the way, after I went to the Miami conference, I bought a bunch of Bitcoins for my kids. And I'm going to buy some Ethereum after I leave this place. This is the way that we preserve wealth. And at that point, we've seen cryptos go up, particularly Bitcoin, radically in the last couple of weeks. And the reason for that, somebody had to sue SEC to remove the barriers against crypto and to allow ETFs to exist. Now, when I bought my crypto, it was very hard it was very difficult to invest in cryptocurrency. And it was really only available to about 3% of the people in the world. And they were the people who were like libertarians, or they were cyberpunks, or they're people who were just curious about freedom or about innovative technologies and had the energy and the drive to figure out, how do you buy a Bitcoin? How do you buy an Ethereum coin? How do you buy a stable currency? Most people wouldn't do that. So there was only about 3%. After SEC was sued, and ETFs now come out, and you have BlackRock and all these other companies who are investing in cryptos. We're now seeing price honesty. We're seeing the price and value discovery. So the value of these currencies is skyrocketing now because people are beginning to understand that this is a hedge against inflation, that it has an intrinsic value. And we're seeing that real value reflected in the prices, these big spikes in the prices that we're experiencing in this space. So, it's about freedom, all kinds of freedoms, the freedom to keep the fruits of your labor, freedom of speech, and all the other freedoms that we care about, the transactional freedom.
That was great. I have a theory that if we had asked for permission to innovate the innovation of a stablecoin, the US government would have said no. This industry is who created the stablecoin, and Paul Volcker was famous for saying about 30 years ago, the financial system really hadn't innovated anything new since the ATM. I think stablecoins are a real innovation, but having formed a bank and applied to the Federal Reserve and been denied, I can tell you from experience, I think there would not have been permission to innovate had we asked for it. So how, as president, would you ensure that all this regulation that has been built up to stop us, which we've had to go to the court system to sue in order to block, how would you ensure that that's all torn down?
Well, I would say that the federal government at this point is making a war on cryptocurrencies, and that it's doing everything that it possibly can do to end the innovation in cryptocurrencies. And the impact is that it's driving it offshore, it's driving it to Asia, to parts of Europe, and we should be, as president, I'm going to make this country the hub of cryptocurrency and blockchain innovation and stablecoin innovation for the world. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that with a number of things. I'm going to end the war by the OCC, the FDIC on the banks that are actually trafficking in cryptos. I'm going to make sure that people can own their own wallets in Bitcoin. They can own their own nodes. They can, and that. Can I finish? And I'm as president of the United States, that's what I'm going to do. Oh, and I'm going to make regulation energy neutral. Jamie Dimon this week made a statement, and Jamie Dimon has more influence over the federal government than anybody, including Larry Fink. And Jamie Dimon said that his plan for cryptocurrencies was to regulate them out of existence. So, and I think that is exactly what President Biden is doing now. I'm going to change that. I'm going to make sure that our banks are crypto-friendly. I want to end the taxation of Bitcoin, which is now taxed as a security, and it should not be a security. There are issues with Bitcoin because I don't want to create a windfall for BlackRock and some of the other, mega owners. But small transactions of all cryptocurrencies should be untaxed. You should be able to buy. You should be able to buy an apple, a beer, or an automobile using crypto without having it taxed for the value that it's accrued since you purchased it. And so those are some of the things that I'm going to do to free up transactional freedom.
Well, you certainly got a cheer from the crowd on the taxation point. Obviously, pretty much everybody here owns crypto to some degree. One thing you said in your campaign really struck me, that in your career you've sued the government more than 500 times, and that as learning from that process, you know how to take these federal agencies apart, and you know the people. You said many of the people are well-meaning, but they've been sort of forced into a corrupt system. So how do you dismantle those agencies, and what is your experience from having sued the government so often?
I haven't sued the government 500 times. I've brought over 500 lawsuits against polluters, against pharmaceutical industry, but probably about 20% of those lawsuits have been against government agencies. I've probably sued EPA more than any other attorney. I've sued the Department of Agriculture. I'm involved in litigation right now involving the Department of Transportation. I've sued FDA, CDC, NIH, USDA, et cetera. And when you sue them, you sue these agencies, you get a PhD in corporate capture, and you understand how to unravel it. And for me, in many of these agencies, I understand who the particular individuals are who need to be moved. I could tell you their names right now, but also the perverse incentives that put agency capture on steroids. Now, I've never sued the Fed, and I know what I want to do with the Fed, which is to restore transparency, to restore sovereignty, to make sure that the Fed is not a tool of Wall Street, that if the Fed is doing what it is, either way, I'd love to dismantle the Fed altogether. But I'm also dealing with, and that's what my uncle also understood that, which is why my uncle, John Kennedy, launched right before he died the silver certificate and the gold certificates because he understood the importance of base currency. He came from a financial family, and he understood how the Fed had been captured, even back then, by Wall Street to create these inflationary cycles that were driving wealth upward and serving to consolidate wealth and to consolidate the power of the Wall Street banks. The Fed originally was created in order to make solvent, stable financial institutions during financial crises and to create liquidity. But it has devolved into a different function. And I am going to unravel that. And I'm going to, as I said, I'm going to restore sovereignty and transparency to that institution. And I'm going to make it so that Main Street is the focus of American political economy rather than Wall Street. And that, that's going to be the center of all of my policies, to restore Main Street and to put the reins on Wall Street.
Thank you. That's news. I had not seen that was your view of the Federal Reserve before, and I really appreciate that you shared that with us today, because I think you're in a crowd that understands the significance of that and how the Federal Reserve has played a role in picking the pockets of the average American through the mechanism of inflation. And having worked on Wall Street and witnessed some of those mechanisms where people's pockets are being picked, not necessarily nefariously. Again, it's the way the system is set up. That's part of the reason why I left to come into this industry, because I understood that there are very subtle skimming mechanisms where people's pockets are being picked. The Dole Food case is a perfect example of it. The Wall Street ledger system created 1/3 more shares than were actually issued. Anytime you get an excess supply of something, leaving demand and all else equal, what happens? The price drops. So the legitimate owners of Dole Food shares had their pockets picked, and some of it was nefarious, some of it was not, but that's the dishonesty of the ledger system of Wall Street. The fact that the SEC didn't do anything about that is shocking to me, and this is the system that we have. I think a lot of folks out there know that there's something wrong with it, that there is something nefarious. They're absolutely right. But it's subtle, and I really appreciate that you shared that insight with us today. Let's talk a little bit more about corporate capture, because that is one of your big campaign themes, and you've witnessed it from your lawsuits against the government. How, other than dismantling the agencies, do you fix corporate capture? How do you get money out of politics? What would you do?
Well, the biggest contributor to corporate capture was the Citizens United case. And it is unfortunately, it's hard to do anything about that. And for those of you who don't know Citizens United, we actually lost our democracy in the 1880s and 1890s, the Gilded Age, where you had a handful of families, the Whitneys, the Morgans, the Carnegies, the Fricks, who were controlling these big trusts, the steel trust, the sugar trust, the rail trust, et cetera, the oil trust. They had overlapping boards, and at that time in history, there was no direct election of senators. So the senators were chosen by the state legislatures, and the legislatures were easily purchased and owned by this cabal of families. It was said of the Pennsylvania state legislature that it was the only legislature in the country where nobody was for sale, because John D. Rockefeller already owned them all and he wasn't selling any of them. But they could pick the Senate, they could pick the presidents of the United States. And there were no taxes at that time. There was no income taxes, there were no corporate taxes. Oh, you had a confluence of events. You had the progressive movement, which was Republican, form in the cities, the populist movement, which is Democrat, form in the countryside. You had these muckraking journalists like Ida Tarbell and Upton Sinclair, who came along and started exposing John D. Rockefeller and the other robber barons as crooks. And they wrote these extraordinary articles for McClure's, which everybody in our country read. And you had the election of a president who was part of the oligarchy, but he was not intimidated by it. And he was a populist at heart, Teddy Roosevelt. And Roosevelt created, during those administrations, created the graduated income tax, the corporate income tax, so corporations had to pay their fair share of our national bills for the first time in history. They created the 40-hour work week. They allowed unions to organize. They gave women the vote. They created in 2000, and they created their Sherman Antitrust Act and broke up the Standard Oil Company. The most important bill that they passed to save democracy was a bill that they passed in 2008, or 1908, sorry, that made it illegal for corporations to donate to federal political candidates. And that rule stood for 102 years. And then a business-friendly Supreme Court threw it out in 2010 in the Citizens United case, and they said that monetary contributions to a politician are the equivalent of speech, and therefore they're protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution. So because it is a constitutional finding by the highest court in the land, it is very, very difficult to unravel that bill. And that was when this amplification, this acceleration of corporate capture on steroids really began. And so now there's things that you can do that I can do as president, because I've been in this space for 40 years thinking about how to unravel it, and I know how to do it by going agency by agency and fixing the problems. You know, there are generic problems like the revolving door. Right now, I think 6 of the last 7 FDA commissioners are now working for the pharmaceutical companies. And that's true across all of these industries. And you can fix that by saying, or by passing an executive order saying that you have to wait 5 years before you go work for an industry that you regulated. And we should have that at least 5 years. President Trump promised that he was going to drain the swamp, but he came and he appointed John Bolton to run the NSA, who is the template for a swamp creature. And he put Scott Gottlieb, who was a business partner of Pfizer, to run FDA. And Gottlieb did a $100 billion favor for Pfizer, and then he went back to Pfizer. So he's now on Pfizer's board collecting his payoff. And if you look at every one of those agencies, they were being run by swamp creatures, by people who were part of the industry that agency's supposed to regulate. And I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to bring in people who are honest. I know myself, I'm going to be directly involved in and running and unraveling corporate capture in each of these agencies. I'm going to bring in people like you who are going to help me unravel the Fed and its control of our society. And Catherine Austin Fitts.
For the record, I did not know he was going to say that, so thank you. But I actually want to pull on that thread. Richie Torres, who is one of the most popular representatives in Congress for defending the right to transact, the freedom to innovate, he made a comment recently that struck me, which is that in Congress, they're sending the draft bills to the agencies, and the agencies are effectively drafting the bills. And I thought about that from my own experience, that the regulations have become so complicated that the elected officials can't possibly know them all. And that puts an incredible amount of power in the hands of the agencies. And Richie was openly questioning on the stablecoin bill why they're consulting with the agencies who have tried to kill this industry. So how do you literally tear down the regulatory structure to simplify it so that the elected officials can have the power again?
Yeah, I'm actually more worried about industry's control over Congress. Oh, the pharmaceutical industry, the oil industry, the coal industry, the chemical industry, which I've seen firsthand throughout my career. And also, if you look who's controlling, each of their agencies are captured. They become sock puppets for the industry they're supposed to regulate. And if you look, the CIA is a sock puppet for the military-industrial complex. Its function is to provide a steady pipeline of forever wars for Raytheon and General Dynamics and Northrop Grumman and Boeing and Lockheed. That's who it's working for. It's not working for the American public. My uncle understood that in 1961 when he came into power. 4 months in, during the Bay of Pigs, when he realized he'd been lied to his agents, by his agency and by the military brass. He said publicly he took blame for it, but privately he said to his aides, I want to take the CIA and shatter it into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. But also, the Fed is a captive agency by the banking industry. Jamie Dimon and Larry Fink run the Fed. It's not working for you and me. It's working to enrich, to flood the canyons of Wall Street with money. And that is, that's much more concerning to me than the agencies. The agencies have too much power because they're owned by the industry. It's not because the agency didn't have too much power when it was working for the American public. But they don't do that. The health agencies are not working for public health. They're working to keep us sick. Because the agency, the group that controls them, the pharmaceutical industry, profits from chronic disease. It's now $4.3 trillion a year we're spending on chronic disease, and nobody's even doing research on it at NIH. So that's a big problem. Like all of these agencies are controlled by an industry, and I think that is the biggest threat to American democracy.
Yeah, thank you. That is that. What struck me when I saw that interview was you said that you were the man for the time because of the need to take power out of Washington, D.C., and the experience that you had had from suing an agency, which I've only done once, but and we don't know the outcome yet. Let's talk a little bit next about privacy. You started by talking at the beginning of this about the story of the truckers in Canada. Everybody, all the shadowy supercoders in this room are working on creating a more honest financial system by using a more honest ledger. It's really that simple. And what happened with the truckers in Canada that struck you is happening a lot. And a lot of it has to do with privacy. Yesterday, most of you don't even know this. I sat up here on this stage yesterday talking about regulation and mentioned the Corporate Transparency Act. Well, last night, an Alabama federal district judge struck down the Corporate Transparency Act as unconstitutional. Now, the impact on all of you is that DAOs would not be able to comply with the Corporate Transparency Act. That was an attack by the Biden administration on our sector, and a federal judge struck it down last night. So let's talk a little bit about financial privacy and the right to transact.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think that's one of the great, one of the role that this group, that's very, very critical for this group to play, particularly as AI comes on the scene, and that which really, is an opportunity for innovation, an opportunity to benefit our lives, but also a real threat to human freedoms and human sovereignty over our own lives and existence. And one of the safeguards, the bulwarks against these encroachments by AI is the requirement for open source algorithms. And And then, and the potential also for smart contracts and all the other benefits that we can get from smart chain from blockchain for our economy, but also for our freedom. The reigning case in privacy now is the Carpenter case, which was a good case in that it said that the Carpenter case was a case about using cell phones and GPS systems to track somebody. And the court said that the federal enforcement agencies needed to get a warrant to get your GPS tracking information from your cell phone or from other GPS sources. That was a protected privacy right. But they also said at the same time, and that was a very good decision. They also said in the same decision that if you voluntarily give your information to a company, then that is not protected from federal investigations. So you all know that if you rent a car, or if you buy a cell phone or whatever, that you have to sign these terms and condition contracts. When you rent a car, you are giving all of your information, the speed you drive, the distance you go, the places you go, but also the conversations that you have in that car that are picked up by microphones. That is all owned by Hertz or Avis or Budget. And what this federal case said is that since you voluntarily gave it to them, that it is now discovering, it is that the federal enforcement agencies, the FBI, can get that information from those companies without a warrant. So I think that is a really catastrophic decision, because you and I all know that we sign these terms and condition contracts with our companies, and that they're using that to harvest information. It's the new oil rush. Siri knows everything about you. You voluntarily signed a contract for that. Siri is not working for you. They're working for Bill Gates and all these people who are harvesting information. And now all of that information is available to the government enforcement agencies without a warrant. And that's wrong. They should get a warrant. It is a real incursion on all of our privacy.
We have the ability to overturn that. The Supreme Court has at least opened the door to that. I think we've seen the abuse of it from both parties. We saw the abuse of it when General Flynn was unmasked. They got every financial transaction and every cell phone ping his cell phone had ever pinged, and we're witnessing it right now with the Biden family's finances being spread out in the newspapers because the government was able to get access to all of these transactions without a warrant. It used to be that the ACLU fought for these things. The ACLU did fight for the defendant in the Carpenter case, and the Supreme Court held that the government needed a warrant and said, you cannot live in a modern society without giving your data away. And that doesn't mean that the government should be able to go to private sources and just buy it and prosecute you without a warrant. How would you weigh the policy of law enforcement against the need for privacy, especially speaking to a lot of folks in this audience who are experts in cryptography?
Well, I would do a number of things. One of the things, as soon as I get into office, my first day in office, I'm going to issue an executive order against any federal agency participating in censorship with the social media companies or the media companies, and restoring the prohibition, which is in its charter, of the CIA propagandizing Americans. But I'm also going to work on legislation. I'm going to use the White House as a bully pulpit to explain to the American public the importance of privacy, the dangers of having these companies that can take our information and turn them over to the government. And I'm going to use the power of the executive order anywhere that I can to prohibit, under my administration, any federal agency from harvesting that kind of data without a warrant. And I'm going to try to persuade Congress to pass a law making that kind of data harvesting illegal by U.S. enforcement agencies, and particularly the CIA.
Thank you. Wow, I think that got more applause than even the tax policy announced earlier. All right, I'm looking out at the audience to see where the Q&A is starting. Let's see. It's over. All right, here we go.
You guys hear me over here?
Yes, we can. John, fire away.
Hey. So I'm not going to ask a question, but I'm going to be helping curate over here. So we got some interested folks to ask some questions. We're going to go for about 20 minutes, and then we'll say our adieus. Okay, so after the 20 minutes, I'm coming up on stage, though, so don't go anywhere.
Okay.
Okay. All right, do we have number one? Okay, who has got the first question? Go ahead.
All right, well, first off, thank you for being here. I think I speak with all of us. Thank you for being here. Seriously. My name's Tyler, TY Crypto. I got a question for you here. So, in terms of elections, we hear a lot of bull with elections. You can put elections on a blockchain. Is that something that you would look into as president so that we can have fair and free elections for the first time in, I can't even tell you how long?
Yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued by that idea. You know, my objective is to have elections in this country that everybody has faith in, that make it as easy as possible to vote, and that nobody in this country suspects that the vote is rigged or fixed. So if you can come up with with a plan for doing that, I will do everything in my power to promote it. And if blockchain is the answer, then that's a great answer.
Thank you.
You said that your grandfather was the first commissioner of the SEC. So based on that, what are your thoughts on politicians doing insider trading like Nancy Pelosi?
I think that should be forbidden. She's an incredible investor, though. And really, I know that my kids showed me a site the other day that just follows her investments. It's like a fund. Because she's such a genius. I think it should be illegal.
Thank you. Just one last question. So I just want to say I work for a company that called Inside 4, and what we do is we track inside trading. I have the website on the back of my hoodie, inside4.com. It's a good domain.
Hear it.
So we actually track inside trading. So check it out, inside4.com.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, how's everybody doing? So my question is, if you're elected president, what would you immediately do about the 17,000 orphans that are in Palestine killed by Israel's unjust bombing of their country?
You mean what would I do about ending the war in Gaza? Is that what you're saying?
Specifically around the orphans that have had their family members killed and don't have anybody to rely on. The 17,000 of them since October, specifically, and the thousands more since before then.
Yeah, I mean, I would do everything I can to make sure those orphans are taken care of, that they're not starving, that they're receiving medical care. And I think that should be a priority of U.S. policy in the region.
Given your inclination towards privacy and security, would you support repealing the Patriot Act?
Yeah, I would have repealed the Patriot Act the first day it was passed.
You just made news again.
And you know, the Patriot Act also has a provision in it, you know, it's 342 pages. There's only one member of Congress that actually read it, and that was Dennis Kucinich, who was running my campaign. And he voted against it, as did, I think, a couple of other people. But, you know, they passed it, and it was just an assault on the Constitution. It was the beginning of this assaults, of all of these assaults that culminated in COVID. In COVID, we saw the First Amendment abandoned. I just won a lawsuit a week ago against Biden for censoring my speech and for censoring other people's speech. But we saw President Biden 37 hours after he took the oath of office, and this is in the federal judge opinion in my case, he was contacting, his White House was contacting Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube, and telling them, and Twitter, and telling them that if they didn't remove me from their platforms, that the White House was going to try to abolish their Section 230 protection. So Section 230, as most of you know, is a section of the Communications Act, and it makes it so that those companies are immune to defamation suits from people who are defamed by posts that they put on their platforms. I used to write a lot of op-eds for the New York Times. And whenever I wrote an article, these only 800-word articles, I would have to spend about an hour on the phone with lawyers at the New York Times who were going through every factual assertion to make sure it wasn't defamatory. So when the social media sites started, they realized that they could not be responsible for vetting every post. If they had to have a lawyer look at every post, their model simply couldn't exist. So Congress created a provision called Section 230 that said, because if I wrote something defamatory in the New York Times, the person who I defamed could sue not only me, but they could sue the publisher. Oh, this was existential for the social media sites. They would not exist if that rule applied to them. So Congress gave them exemptions saying that if somebody publishes something defamatory on their site, you can sue the guy who posted it, but you cannot sue Twitter or Facebook or Google. And their whole business model is dependent on that. Well, the Biden administration was saying, we are going to end that if you do not censor these people. And it wasn't just me. It was many, many hundreds of people. And the companies caved in, and they gave portals that were used by the CIA, the FBI, DHS, and IRS. I don't know why, but IRS was also using those portals where they could go in and the agency could actually censor material. And I was removed from Instagram. I lost almost 1 million followers. And then from then on, I had to self-censor on Twitter and these other platforms. So for 2.5 years, I was, publishing pictures of unicorns and kitty cats, and and I was not putting anything controversial on my site because I knew they were going to throw me off, and then I'd lose all those followers who I wanted to communicate with. So anyway, that. We need to end that. We need to end the censorship, and we need to make it, and by the way, in Europe, it's even worse than it is here. In Europe, the European community has recently adopted a rule in France and Germany that if you criticize an mRNA vaccine, it's a penalty of up to $50 million. So, none of these sites are going to allow anything on there that is controversial at all. It's the end of free speech. And we need, the Trump administration was doing it too, the Biden administration, and we need to have free speech back in this country.
I deeply appreciate your views on the freedom to transact. My question is, does that apply only to Americans or to everyone, everywhere? In this room, we're no big fans of the SEC and Gary Gensler, but the organizations probably cause more harm would be FinCEN and OFAC, and regulations would say hundreds of millions of people on this planet are designated as basically terrorists. This is what got Binance in trouble with their multi-billion-dollar settlement. It's what was used for basis throw the founders of Tornado Cash in prison. And so would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I could not hear the question. Can you?
The freedom to transact, does that apply only to Americans or to people everywhere? This was the basis for Tornado Cash founders being thrown in prison, for the Binance founder having a multi-billion-dollar settlement because of OFAC violations.
Yeah. I mean, as President of the United States, I'll only have control over what happens here in this country. Other countries are going to have their own rules, and countries like China are going to have very, very different regulations than we have here. Right now, there are many countries, Switzerland, Belgium, Portugal, Singapore, that have better laws than we do. They do not tax transactions in Bitcoin, and their industries and their cryptos have a big economic advantage over us. I want to bring the hub of innovation back to this country, and that means stopping the taxation of small transactions for cryptos.
Could I ask a follow-up to that? How do you balance? None of us wants human traffickers using our technology. How do you balance that against the legitimate privacy uses of those technologies? And related to that, could you comment on the policy of weaponizing the U.S. dollar against our enemies and weaponizing the U.S. dollar system in particular?
The weaponization of the U.S. dollar has degraded its position as the global reserve currency. It's one of the reasons for the emergence of BRICS. And that is an enormous threat to the American economy. If we lose that status as the global reserve currency, we'll see the absolute collapse of the American dollar, which could happen anyway. I mean, I saw we now have $34 trillion in debt that we're loading on our children. In the last 100 days, we've run up an additional $1 trillion in debt. Oh, that alone, we're now, the service on our debt, even at the current interest rates, which are historically pretty low, we are paying more to service our debt than the entire military budget. By 2030, at this rate, every dollar that's going to be collected in taxes is going to go to service the debt, and that obviously is not sustainable. Oh, there are other threats to the U.S. dollar that I think are even more grave than the weaponization of foreign policy, but I think it's a very dangerous game to weaponize the dollar as a tool in foreign policy. It's very tempting, but it's very, very dangerous because it's going to cause these nations to walk away from the dollar.
And related to that, how about the privacy point of the question that the questioner asked?
I mean, listen, I don't know exactly how Ethereum works, but I know in Bitcoin, every transaction ultimately is traceable. So if you want to stop the black market, there are ways for law enforcement agencies to track that down. What I would say to you is that if it comes to law enforcement and stopping bad things from happening around the globe, drug trade, even human trafficking, or our protection of our constitutional rights and privacy, I would put constitution and privacy first. And I would say, if we have to choose, if there's no other choice but that, I would have to go with the Constitution and privacy. Oh, I think that, America has always made this deal that we tie one hand behind our back when we function around the world because in order to protect what's great about this country and what's great is the United States Constitution, and it was written for hard times. It wasn't written for easy times. There's no pandemic exception in the United States Constitution. And the framers of the Constitution knew all about epidemics. There was 2 epidemics during the Revolutionary War. One of them, the armies of Virginia were decimated by a malaria epidemic. There was a smallpox epidemic that absolutely debilitated the armies of New England at the very time that Benedict Arnold's army had conquered Montreal. So he had made it into the inner city, he had taken the city, but he had to withdraw the troops and give up Canada because he couldn't support him because so many of his troops were down with smallpox. And if that hadn't been so, Canada today would be part of the United States. And all of the framers, when they gathered at Philadelphia, knew that. Plus, between the end of the Revolution and the beginning of and the ratification of the Bill of Rights, there were epidemics in every city in our country, smallpox, yellow fever, cholera, that killed tens of thousands of people, including family members for most of the people who were at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. Everybody was aware of it, and yet they did not put a epidemic exception in the Constitution. They just said, these are rights and nothing could stop them. During the Civil War, which was a much worse crisis for our country, than COVID, there was 659,000 Americans died. It's the equivalent of 7.2 million people today. Plus, our country was at the verge of being torn apart. And at that time, the Confederates were sending agents provocateur to the northern cities to incite draft riots. And this was absolutely demoralizing northern morale. So Abraham Lincoln knew who those people were who were coming up from the South. And when they started to incite riots, he would arrest them, put them in jail, and suspended their rights to habeas corpus because it was a national emergency. That case went up to the Supreme Court, and Chief Justice Roger Taney said you can't do it, even if the life of the nation is at stake, even if millions of people could die, you can't do it, because the Constitution is more important than anything else. And I believe the same thing. The Constitution was written for hard times, not for easy times. The First Amendment is not there to guarantee the speech that we all want to hear. It's there to guarantee the stuff that none of us wants to hear, the stuff that is offensive and obnoxious and repellent. All of that. I remember 1978, the ACLU went to bat for the Nazis who wanted to march through Skokie, Illinois, which is a Jewish neighborhood where there are a lot of Holocaust survivors. We all understood that because even though we were absolutely appalled by what they were saying, we had to be willing to die for their right to say it. That's what our country is about. And, it's not free speech in the Constitution did not come for free. It came at a cost. And we all have to be willing to pay that cost. And, a government that can silence its opponents has a license for any atrocity. And, and we have to be willing, even if, there's tragedy, even if we have to die, we have to understand there's a lot worse things than dying. And one of those things is to live like a slave.
Thank you. That was great. We're getting the hook here. I want to thank you, Bobby, for your presence here today. I also want to congratulate the audience. We had some agent provocateurs at the beginning of this, and you handled that with grace. I especially want to thank you guys here in the front row for respectfully escorting the gentleman out when he had said what he was going to say. That's a part of this community. We actually handled it with respect and grace, and I think that is the evidence that we'd like to show here going forward. So, John, thank you for having us.
Thanks, Caitlin. Don't go anywhere real quick, guys. So, please, big round of applause. Thank you. So, everybody knows that we're really big on memes around here. And there was a meme that got shared on X yesterday. And you go you. Bruh. The Biddle meme. So when we come to Eat Denver, it's not about hodling your Bitcoins. Yeah, sure, we'll do that. Yes. But Biddle is the rally cry of the Bufficorn. Now, at opening ceremonies, we created a new club this year for those that have contributed deeply and greatly to this community in an extraordinary way. It's called the Bluff Club. And I am charged by our board to induct the both of you into the Bluff Club, which means our next two Bufficorns right here. And we're going to biddle something. Do you want to say it?
We're going to biddle back better.
Now that's a... So to have that, we have a couple of little, we're big on swag here too, memes and swag. So Spork DAO is the parent of Eat Denver. It's community owned, it's a co-op. I'm the founder of that, but these guys are the owners. And we have a custom engraved golden spork. And it's numbered, there's only one of 300. And the original tokens from 2019 that were charged with the Buffa tokens to use on the food trucks, these are collector's items. They're numbered as well. And our deepest gratitude to you guys for having this conversation. Honestly, it exceeded my expectations. Anybody else? Now, if you are interested, we still have a little bit of space at the reception, the meet and greet that's happening near the Bufficorn Biddle Brigade Lounge right now. So if you do want to come in, again, memes, it's $528 for the meet and greet. And if you want to get into, I'm not sure if we have any room in the VIP, but it's $5,280. Anybody know what the meme is? Mile High City. Thank you. We do that all the time. So thank you for coming. This is the final piece of content for the weekend. So with that, we bid you biddle.